From the very first moment, something felt wrong. The neighborhood was calm, the lawns freshly cut, and the houses lined up in perfect order, just the way the HOA liked it. But hidden beneath that calm trouble was waiting. Mark, a quiet homeowner, thought he was doing something small and harmless. He had just installed a brand new mailbox. Strong metal, clean design, painted in a color that matched his home perfectly. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud. It was simply a mailbox, yet to him it was perfect. Neighbors even nodded with approval, saying, "Looks good, Mark, really sharp." For a few days, life was normal. Every morning Mark walked outside, coffee in hand, proud of his little upgrade. But on the fourth morning, his pride turned into shock. A bright orange paper clung to the side of the mailbox. Big, bold letters shouted, "Violation Notice." Mark froze. His eyes moved down the page. The words hit him like a punch. "Your mailbox is not in compliance with HOA rules. Remove or replace immediately." Illegal? His mailbox? He couldn't believe it. Mark looked around. Across the street, Mrs. Jensen had a mailbox leaning sideways, paint peeling off. Next door, the Smiths had a crooked wooden post that looked like it hadn't been fixed in years. Down the block, another family had a giant decorative mailbox shaped like a birdhouse. None of them looked official. So why his? Confusion twisted into frustration. He read the notice again, searching for details, but it gave no rule number, no explanation, just a demand. He walked back inside, letter in hand, heart pounding. Something didn't add up. He thought about the compliments he had received, the effort he had put into making his home look nice. And now, the HOA was telling him that his simple, clean mailbox was a crime. That morning marked the beginning of a storm that would drag him into late-night arguments, and secret meetings and battles he never expected to fight. And as he sat at his kitchen table staring at the paper, questions filled his mind like thunder rolling in. Why was his mailbox targeted? Was someone on the board holding a grudge? Or was there something bigger, something hidden, that the HOA didn't want anyone to see? What Mark didn't know was that this one orange paper was only the first shot. The HOA wasn't done with him, and soon the neighborhood would never look the same again. Only a few days after the orange violation notice appeared, Mark opened his mailbox to find an official letter from the HOA. The envelope was thick, the paper stiff, the kind of letter meant to make someone nervous before they even read it. He sat at the kitchen table, unfolded the letter, and read the words slowly. The HOA demanded that he remove or replace his mailbox within 14 days. If he failed to do so, he would face daily fines and possible legal action. The letter was written in a cold, formal tone, as if Mark had done something terrible, something far worse than simply installing a new mailbox. Mark read it again, then a third time, trying to find the part where it explained exactly why his mailbox was illegal. But there was nothing clear, nothing that made sense. Confused, he pulled out the HOA rulebook he had kept since moving into the neighborhood. He flipped through the pages, scanning the sections on property appearance, yard maintenance, and yes, mailboxes. The rules only said that mailboxes should be neat, functional, and in good condition. That was it. No mention of style, no ban on color, no height restrictions written in the text. By every definition in the book, his mailbox was perfectly fine. So why was he the one being targeted? Suspicion started to build in his mind. He thought back to the HOA meeting he had attended months ago, where the board president gave him a sharp look after Mark questioned a budget decision. Could this be personal? Was someone on the board using rules as a weapon against him? That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the letter on the counter, the words non-compliance and fines flashing in his head. He wasn't the kind of person who liked conflict, but he wasn't the type to roll over either. The more he thought about it, the stranger it felt. Across the street, that old leaning mailbox was still standing. The peeling paint, the rusted hinges. No violation notice there. Just his. Mark folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and made a quiet decision. He wasn't going to take the mailbox down. Not yet. Not until he had real proof that it was against the rules. But deep down, he knew something bigger was happening. The HOA wasn't just sending him a warning. They were testing him. They wanted to see if he would bend or if he would fight. And Mark, unknowingly, had just taken his first step into a battle that was about to consume the whole neighborhood. The letter kept bothering Mark, so when the next HOA meeting was announced, he decided to go. He walked into the small community clubhouse with the letter folded in his pocket and a notebook in his hand. He wasn't looking for a fight. He just wanted answers. The room was full. Neighbors sat in rows of folding chairs, whispering about lawn rules, parking spaces, and new landscaping fees. At the front of the room sat the HOA board. The president, Mr. Collins, a tall man with sharp glasses, Mrs. Turner, who always seemed to scowl at everyone, and a few other members who nodded at whatever the president said. When the time for questions came, Mark stood up. His voice was calm but steady. "I received this violation notice about my mailbox," he said, holding up the letter. "The rules say mailboxes should be neat, functional, and in good condition. Mine is. Can you please show me the rule that says my mailbox is not allowed?" The room went quiet. All eyes turned to the board. Mr. Collins adjusted his glasses. "Your mailbox does not meet community standards," he said flatly. Mark frowned. "What standards? I've read the rules. There's nothing that says my mailbox is illegal." Mrs. Turner leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Sir, the board has determined it is out of compliance. That's all you need to know. The notice is valid." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others exchanged looks, as if they had seen this type of response before. Mark pressed on. "So there's no written rule? No section I can read for myself? You just determined it?" The president's jaw tightened. "You're wasting everyone's time. The decision stands. Remove it or face fines." That was it. No explanation, no fair discussion, just a wall of cold stares. As Mark sat down, he heard whispers behind him. One neighbor muttered, "They've had it out for him since last year." Another whispered, "Collins doesn't like him, that's why." Mark clenched his jaw. It wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. Something was off. The board wasn't being fair, they were being personal. And the fact that neighbors were whispering about it only made his suspicion stronger. The meeting moved on to other topics, but Mark barely heard any of it. He sat quietly, the letter still in his pocket, his mind racing. The board's refusal to explain proved one thing. This wasn't about rules at all. It was about power. And if they thought he was going to back down easily, they were about to be disappointed. Mark left the meeting frustrated but more determined than ever. He had asked for proof, for a simple rule, and the board had given him nothing but cold stares. That night, he stood outside and looked at his mailbox under the streetlight. Clean, strong, perfectly normal. He decided then he wasn't going to remove it. Days passed. At first, nothing happened. But on the fifth morning, another envelope appeared in his mailbox. This one was even thicker than before. Mark tore it open, and his stomach dropped as he read. The letter said that if he did not remove the mailbox immediately, the HOA would begin issuing daily fines of $100. Worse still, it warned that if the fines continued unpaid, the board could take legal action against him, even place a lien on his home. Mark gripped the letter tightly. A simple mailbox was now being treated like a crime that could cost him thousands of dollars, or even his house. The pressure grew heavy. At night he sat at his table staring at the mounting letters, while during the day he noticed how neighbors behaved differently. A few stopped by quietly to show support. One whispered, "We know they're targeting you. Others have mailboxes worse than yours, and they've never been fined." But the neighbors who supported him spoke in hushed voices, always looking over their shoulders. Others, however, avoided him. People who used to wave from their yards now turned away. Parents who once let their kids play in front of his house now kept them closer. Fear of the HOA's power hung over the block like a dark cloud. Mark felt the isolation. The board's tactics were working. They wanted him to feel cornered, to feel like no one would stand with him. But instead of breaking him, it only hardened his resolve. Each new letter he received went into a growing folder on his desk. He started writing notes, recording dates, and taking pictures of every broken, rusted, or non-matching mailbox in the neighborhood. If the board wanted to play this game, he would gather his own evidence. The HOA thought they could scare him into giving up. But Mark wasn't going to bend so easily, and as the fines threatened to pile higher and higher, he realized this was no longer just about one mailbox. This was about standing up to a system that thought it could crush anyone who dared to question it. The fight was no longer coming. It had already begun. Mark's folder of evidence grew thicker with each passing day. Every time he walked through the neighborhood, he snapped quiet photos. Mailboxes leaning, broken, rusted, painted in strange colors. None of them had violation notices, only his. One evening, as he flipped through the HOA's documents on his desk, something caught his eye. A recent update, buried in the middle of the paperwork, said that mailboxes were now recommended to follow a certain design approved by the board. The wording was vague, not a rule, just a suggestion. Still, the timing felt suspicious. Mark dug deeper. He searched through community newsletters, old meeting notes, and even checked local business filings online. That's when he found it, something that made his stomach twist. The HOA president's close friend had recently started a mailbox installation company. And the style of mailbox the HOA now recommended? The exact same design sold by that friend's company. It was like a light switched on. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about neighborhood standards. It was about money and control. Mark sat back in his chair, staring at the papers spread across his desk. It all made sense now. The board wasn't protecting the community. They were using power to force homeowners into buying from their friend, and he had been the first target. The discovery filled him with anger, but also clarity. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't imagining things. The board's actions had nothing to do with his mailbox. They were part of a bigger plan. The next day, Mark quietly tested his theory. He asked a neighbor if they had heard anything about new mailbox rules. The neighbor frowned and said, "Funny you ask. I got a flyer in my mailbox a month ago about some company offering HOA-approved installations. I tossed it in the trash." That was the final piece of the puzzle. The HOA had set the stage for a scheme, and Mark had stumbled right into the middle of it. He looked at his mailbox again that evening. It wasn't just a box for letters anymore. It had become a symbol. If he gave in, the board would win, and the scheme would keep rolling forward, forcing neighbor after neighbor to pay up. But if he fought back, if he exposed what he had found, the board's little secret wouldn't stay hidden for long. For the first time since this all began, Mark didn't just feel cornered. He felt ready. The HOA thought they were clever. They thought he would fold. But he now had the truth in his hands. And truth, he knew, could be more powerful than any fine they threatened. Mark knew the next HOA meeting could change everything. For days he prepared. He printed photos of leaning, broken, rusted mailboxes all over the neighborhood, each one untouched by violation notices. He highlighted sections of the HOA rulebook showing there were no clear rules against his mailbox. And most importantly, he printed proof of the board president's friend's new mailbox company, along with the recommended design that just happened to match. His dining table looked like the desk of a lawyer, papers stacked neatly, photos laid out, sticky notes marking important details. Every time he looked at the growing pile, he felt his nerves tighten, but his resolve grow stronger. The night of the meeting, Mark walked into the clubhouse carrying a folder so thick it barely closed. The room was packed again, neighbours filling every seat, some standing along the back wall. People whispered as he walked by. Some gave him encouraging nods. Others avoided his eyes, worried about being seen taking sides. At the front, the board sat as usual. President Collins with his cold stare, Mrs. Turner with her sharp frown, and the others waiting silently. When the floor opened for community comments, Mark stood. His heart pounded, but his voice came out steady. "I'm here about the violation against my mailbox," he said, holding up the letter. "The board claims it's out of compliance, but I've gone through every rule, and there is no section that says my mailbox is illegal. None." Collins smirked. "Mr. Thompson, we've already explained—" "No," Mark interrupted, his voice firm. "You haven't explained. You've dismissed. And tonight, I'm not leaving until everyone here knows the truth." The room stirred. Neighbours leaned forward in their seats. Phones quietly began recording. Mark opened his folder and laid out the photos for everyone to see. "Here," he said, pointing. "This mailbox. Ox has peeling paint. This one is leaning sideways. This one is rusted through. None of them got violation notices. Only mine did." The board shifted uncomfortably, but Mark wasn't finished. He pulled out the documents and held them high. "And here's why. The HOA recently added a recommended design. That design just happens to match the product sold by a company started by the president's close friend. This isn't about rules. It's about money. It's about control." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Some neighbours nodded. Others pulled out their phones to take photos of the documents. Collins slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous! You're making baseless claims!" Mark locked eyes with him. "Then prove me wrong. Show everyone the rule I broke. Show them why my mailbox deserves fines while others are ignored." Silence fell. The board members looked at each other, but none spoke. The tension was thick, the kind of silence that revealed more than words ever could. Mark stood tall, folder still in hand. He had thrown the first real punch, and now the board was on defense. But he also knew, if they decided to retaliate, the cost could be heavy. This was his riskiest move yet, but looking around at the neighbours, seeing their faces light with realization, Mark knew one thing. He wasn't standing alone anymore. The air inside the clubhouse grew heavy after Mark's words. Papers lay scattered across the front table, photos of broken mailboxes, documents with highlighted sections, and the proof of the president's friend's mailbox business. Neighbours leaned forward, whispering loudly enough for the board to hear. Some pulled out their phones, recording everything. A few even snapped pictures of the documents Mark had brought. The quiet power the HOA board once held over the room was starting to slip. Mark's voice was calm but firm as he continued. "This is selective enforcement. The rules are not being applied fairly. If my mailbox is illegal, then so are dozens of others in this neighbourhood. Yet I am the only one threatened with fines. Why? Because the board wants us all to buy from one company, the company tied to the president's close friend." Gasps rippled through the crowd. One neighbour stood up and said loudly, "That explains the flyer I got. I thought it was strange." Another added, "I knew something felt off. They can't just make us buy from their friend." The board members shifted in their seats. Mrs. Turner looked pale, fiddling with her papers. One of the other members whispered something to Collins, but Collins snapped back, his face red with anger. "Everyone calm down!" Collins barked. "These claims are false. The board has the right to set community standards." But his words carried no weight now. Neighbours were no longer silent. Murmurs turned into open discussion, frustration spilling out after years of quiet obedience. "This is corruption," someone shouted from the back. "They've been doing this for years," another added. Phones were pointed directly at the board, recording their every move. The once untouchable leaders now looked cornered, their authority cracking under the pressure of exposed truth. Mark stood firm. "You told me my mailbox was illegit, but you never showed me a rule. Tonight I showed everyone here the truth. You're using fear and fines to push your own agenda. That ends now." The room filled with applause. Not polite, but loud and forceful. Neighbours clapped, some cheered, and the sound shook the walls of the small clubhouse. The board sat frozen, their power slipping away. Collins tried to speak again, but his voice was drowned out by the rising voices of the homeowners. The tide had turned, and everyone in that room could feel it. For the first time, the board wasn't in control. And for the first time, Mark knew he wasn't fighting alone. The room was alive with voices, neighbours speaking louder and louder, demanding answers. The board tried to regain control. Collins slammed his gavel against the table, his voice booming, "Order! Order in the room!" But no one listened. The quiet fear that once kept the community silent was gone. In its place was outrage, strength, and unity. People stood up, one after another, pointing out years of unfair treatment, hidden fees, and unexplained fines. The board had opened a door they could no longer close. Collins tried again. "This meeting is over," he shouted. But the homeowners didn't move. Instead, phones kept recording, voices kept rising, and Mark's evidence sat on the table in full view. Word spread quickly after that night. Neighbours who hadn't attended the meeting heard about what happened within hours. Some shared Mark's photos online. Others posted videos of the board's silence when asked for proof. Within days, the story had left the neighbourhood and reached local news reporters. A small camera crew soon showed up at the clubhouse during another meeting. Reporters asked sharp questions, microphones pushed in front of Collins as he stumbled for answers. The once confident leader now looked cornered, red-faced and defensive. Homeowners gathered outside with signs demanding change. For the first time in years, the board wasn't feared. They were challenged, and they had no good defense. Mark watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. He hadn't wanted a war. He hadn't wanted attention. He had only wanted to keep his simple, sturdy mailbox. But by standing firm, he had revealed the truth. The same board that once told him his mailbox was illegal was now drowning in regret. Their scheme was out in the open. Their control over the neighbourhood had cracked. And Mark? He stood taller than ever, not because of the mailbox, but because he refused to let Feekin win. What began with one orange notice ended with a community waking up, and a board learning the hard way that power built on greed never lasts.